Approximately 4:15 this afternoon, our 911 dispatch received a call from a man who had been snowmobiling in the area of County Road 200 South between County Roads 825 West and County Road 700 West, which is just a couple of miles outside of Lapel. The caller told dispatchers that he thinks he came across a dead body approximately 250 yards south of County Road 200 South near a railroad crossing. He said the body was partially hidden up along a fence row. Deputies arrived within a few minutes and went to the area, and they located two bodies, two deceased persons that have now been positively identified as the missing couple that Lapel Police Department and the Madison County Sheriff's Department has been searching for since December 18th. There was a handgun found at the scene, and you may remember that there was a purchase of a handgun by the missing male just days prior to the last time anyone saw them. We are still processing the scene. As you can imagine, it's pretty well snow covered. We're looking for evidence to be able to determine as best as we can what actually happened. The two bodies were together. The firearm was very near those bodies, and again, they were found along a fence row about 250 yards off the road. Any questions?
Sheriff, did it look like they had walked there and that's where the shooting might have taken place?
Because it has snowed several times, that there wasn't direct evidence of that, but that's the only way you could get there.
How often have you been in conversation with the families of the missing since they first disappeared?
Both police agencies have been talking with family members constantly, daily. There have been several searches done in that same area, but again, this is an area that's very rural, and because of where the bodies were found, it would have been difficult to find them without walking right up on them.
Do you believe they were shot?
It's too early to tell right now, and any attempt to identify any markings on the bodies was really futile, considering how long they'd been there, the temperatures, the snow, and more investigation will be taking place at the morgue, as well as whatever the pathologist is able to determine.
Sheriff, are we thinking this is a murder-suicide situation?
That's conjecture. I think it's a reasonable assumption, but that's all it is right now, is an assumption.
Can you give me insight from your conversations with the relatives they were visiting before they went missing, how their behavior was when they saw them?
No, there have been several people who were interviewed, and there is a combination of opinions from those people that the two were acting just as they always had, and then some people were saying no, they weren't acting as they always had, and you get that in these types of cases.
Were they in Lapel visiting relatives? Is that how you understand it? Or?
The only thing we know is that they were fairly familiar with the Lapel area, but the day that they were reported missing, which was December 18th, I believe, their car was noticed in town on the 17th. But nothing was amiss in regard to the car being in Lapel. There was nothing, no exigent circumstances to make anyone, even a passerby, think that it was anything but a car parked legally in the park.
And it was her mother that reported them missing, right?
I don't know who first made the call. I'm sorry. Honestly, I'm thinking it was his father, but
You mentioned how kind of obscured the two bodies were off the road and in the woods. It's been a month since they went missing. Can you kind of just walk us through the search efforts? I know it was a pretty wide-scale search effort for these two.
well, considering that this was a couple of miles outside of town, and there were several searches done, not knowing what direction to go, it's absolutely a needle in a haystack. In a perfect world, if you had 200 volunteers who could walk up and down for several days, it's possible they could have been found earlier. But again, that's total conjecture at this point.
How long do you believe they've been there?
I have no way of knowing at this point.
And just to clarify, do you guys believe foul play is involved in this then, obviously?
We don't have anything to point us in any other direction other than whatever took place between these two, but I'm not ruling that out until we process the scene.
How were they dressed? Were they dressed for winter?
I would say they were dressed for reasonably cold weather, not necessarily for the kind of weather we've had.
You've already mentioned this, I'm sorry, but do we know how far they were from the car that was found? How far they were found from the car?
Oh, it was at least 1.5 miles, maybe more.
So did they schedule an autopsy yet?
I don't know. I'm sure the coroner will make that decision this evening.
You said the bodies were close together. How close together? Were they in an embrace? Were they?
Yes, in what appeared to be an embrace. Yes.
Which would suggest what to you?
I don't know.
Were there any notes did you find any notes or any other communications on either body?
Not as
In
of
the
yet.
clothing?
Not as of yet. And again, with the weather being what it is, clothing and that type of thing probably hasn't even been processed yet.
Sheriff, Lapel's a small town. This is gonna kind of rock through it, I guess. I mean, both of these young people were known here. What would you tell people from Lapel?
Well, I think these young people lived in Indianapolis at the time. There are some acquaintances and some family members who have been in and around Lapel over the years. You know, the question in these cases every time comes down to why, and I don't think anyone can make an accurate guess on what was going on in one or both of these two young persons' minds. I think the best thing anybody can do is hug their own family and realize that there are some things that, you know, we're just not going to be able to explain.
Sheriff, you talked about there was a purchase of a gun at some point. Do you know who bought that gun? Was it?
The couple was together. There was video to show at the gun shop in Indianapolis. There was video to show that they were on the premises together when the gun was purchased.
Do you know whose name it was purchased under, or who?
I'm sure our detectives do, and I can get that information for you, but I don't have it in front of me.
And that was purchased sometime before they reported missing?
Just within 2 or 3 days, I believe. Just within a few days.
Heaven's mother said that she was prepared to leave him and had been making comments and suggestions about that, and there was some disagreement between the families about some of that.
She did make that statement, and again, that's a piece of evidence that we document. We don't know how accurate that is. It might be 100% accurate. We just have to work with the different scenarios that we are given, and then try to come up with what's most reasonable.
There's a big divergence between what the two families say was actually happening.
Yes, there is.
So,
We don't have any evidence other than those direct statements to lead us one way or another.
Mhm. So what happens now? What will be the course? You'll continue to process the scene surrounding
Well,
the bodies?
at the very least, we have a homicide, which, as you well know, a homicide is one human being taking the life of another. We will attempt to determine if there was any coercion. We will attempt to determine which person died first. We will attempt to determine if there was any communication with anyone else that would help us come to what we would think is a final disposition of the case.
Going back for a second to the bodies and how they were positioned, you recovered a handgun at the scene?
Yes.
Is that correct? So was that handgun in somebody's hand, or was it some distance from the bodies, or very close to the?
It was on the ground.
couple?
It was on the ground, very close to the bodies, within inches.
The male body or the female body? Can you
Both.
tell?
Both.
Both. Okay. Could you tell how many shots had been fired?
Not at this time. We're still processing out there, trying to clear some snow and that kind of thing.
So-
Have you
But
recovered
were
any shells?
As of the time I left the scene, we had not.
Can you confirm then were shots fired?
No.
That's still unknown.
Well, at the time I left the scene, we weren't able to confirm that.
So you can't say with certainty that anybody died of gunshots in this?
No.
Yeah, okay.
Have
How
you,
long-
have you talked to the family tonight?
Our detectives have contacted all of the immediate family, yes.
How long do you expect investigators to be out there?
That's hard to say. They've been out there since we got called there. They're trying to clear away some of the snow and just sift through the area. It's, as you can imagine, it's very difficult to do that in this kind of weather, these temperatures, and once we use something to melt the snow, it's going to be kind of a mess right there in that specific area.
Would you say the two bodies were covered in snow, partially covered in snow, completely drifted over?
I would say partially covered.
Was there evidence of bloodstains around the bodies? that you
Not
could
not
determine?
not that we could see at the time. Again, once the ambulance got there and the bodies were removed, there may very well have been evidence of that.
And no obvious signs of blood or bodily fluids on any of the clothing that you could see?
Not at that time, but again, I left there long before the bodies were moved.
Was there any obvious damage to the bodies that you could see, particularly in terms of perhaps head wounds or neck wounds or anything of that sort?
Nothing obvious at the time. Again, when I left, the bodies had not been moved,
Right.
and they were in kind of an embraced position. So I would guess that at the point that the bodies were moved, an observer could possibly see
Did it appear
more.
as if they fell that way, or that they were in that position for a long period of time?
It didn't really appear either
That
way.
they laid down and
I don't.
embraced?
I can't say. I don't know, to be honest with you. What I can tell you is that they were, laying on the ground together in an embraced position.
From speaking with the families tonight, can you just kind of give us an idea of how they're doing upon getting this news?
They're not taking this well at all, as I think we could imagine would be the case.
Jeff, were you able to identify the gun as the one that the young man purchased?
We hadn't gotten to that point before I left. I would guess that at this point we have, because we have all of that information. I can probably find that out for you before we leave here, if you like.
Were they face up or face down? Or side by side?
Face down.
Did Dankowski have any known criminal background?
I honestly don't know. I know there was nothing in either of their backgrounds that jumped right out and said, you know, this is what we need to be, this is the kind of behavior we need to be looking for. There was nothing real conspicuous there. That also I could get for you.
Is this the hometown of either one of them? Is that why people are saying like they were well known in this town, or there seems to be?
All I can tell you is at the time they went missing, they were living in Indianapolis with a relative. But I do know that the families have acquaintances here, and they knew the town. That much I can tell you.
And their car was spotted in town a day before it was found at the park without them in it.
Correct.
So when you guys went through the car, there was nothing suspicious in the car, correct?
Nothing at all. We continued to look for any type of evidence that would lead us one way or another, and it was very frustrating because typically you will find something, and there was nothing to lead us one way or another in this case.
Is there anything we haven't asked you that you want people to know?
Not that I can think of.
Have you been able to locate the cell phone yet?
Every piece of technology that was available to us has been sent to the forensic experts with the Indiana State Police.
That doesn't quite answer the question.
There has been some information gathered, but it's that research isn't complete yet. But we didn't find anything that gave us a strong lead. Again, that was one of the frustrations.
Mm-hmm.
Every day, you know, we looked for something, and most days there was nothing.
So you have not located the cell phone yet?
Okay, maybe I misinterpreted your question. Are you asking if we found a cell phone tonight, or have we located a cell phone?
Have you located the cell phone that initially led police to search the area immediately surrounding the park? In other words, there were reports that they got a ping off from the cell phone.
I don't believe a cell phone has been found up until possibly tonight, and I don't know yet if investigators found one at the scene, but I can get the answer to that question for you before we leave.
Okay. Well, I mean, it was there was a ping from the general vicinity is what.
Right, because,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
correct. At some point there was a location given.
So if the
And
cell
it was,
phone
and
was,
it was close to this area.
so if the cell phone was found,
It was not found between the time of the report
Right.
and today, to the best of my knowledge,
okay,
the phone itself.
all right.
So if you said they were a mile and a half from the car,
Approximately.
approximately, is there anything to make you believe that they got there other than by foot?
No. I mean, nothing to lead us to believe that. Is it possible? Yes, but we found no evidence of that.
I'm sure.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Let me get answers to some of those questions
Yeah,
for
if
you.
you find out about the gun, that'd be great.